Australia just broke a world record, but not the good kind.
That in a few months' time, there are going to be food shortages.
When two ladies in Australia went into this grocery store, it's playing in reverse right now, and it's completely empty. They went to get like chips or something, and the shelves are completely barren.
You're running out of time because food and energy rationing are next, and if you want a sneak peek into the future, take a look at what's going on in Australia.
Mooloolaba Wharf has no diesel. That means the 70 fishing vessels cannot go out and get seafood, which supply our markets, overseas markets and restaurants.
Walk into any supermarket in Australia right now and look carefully. Not at what is there, at what is not there. The gaps, the bare shelves, the signs that say out of stock, the empty fridges with the lights still on but nothing inside them. The produce section offering half of what it used to, at prices that make people stop, stare, put the item back and walk away. This is not one bad week. This is not a supply hiccup. What is happening on the shelves of Australian supermarkets right now is the visible physical symptom of a system that is breaking down from the inside. Australia, the lucky country, one of the wealthiest, most resource-rich nations on earth, a country that exports food to the world, and right now, its own people are struggling to fill a grocery basket. The food is running short, the fuel is dangerously low. The cost of simply living has reached levels that are breaking families. And hovering over all of it is a global situation. US and Iran rattling oil markets, supply chains fracturing, geopolitical fault lines cracking wide open, that is making every domestic problem significantly worse. This is the story of Australia's sudden collapse. And it starts at the place every Australian feels it first. The empty shelf. If this content pulls back the curtain on what is really happening, hit subscribe and share this right now. Let us get into it.
I have a genuine question that I need somebody to explain to me as if I'm a 5-year-old. When the government says that in a few months' time there are going to be food shortages, what does that mean? Does that mean that when I walk into Woolies or Coles, that there's going to be no fruit and veg, there's going to be no meat, there's going to be no dairy, but like the pantry stuff will be fine? Or does it mean that there will be that stuff, but it will be twice the price? Or is it I'm walking into Woolies and Coles and there is nothing on the shelves, whether it's dairy, veg, fresh stuff, baked goods, or pantry? Like, what do they mean that we're going to have food shortages? Somebody please explain that to me.
There are currently food shortages going on in Australia, and it's not just going to happen there. It's going to end up happening almost everywhere, but let's talk about the Australian situation. So this isn't just in the news. I've seen videos of people going to grocery stores in Australia with empty or half-empty shelves. And this is because they're having a problem with a lack of fuel. Yeah, the fuel crisis or gas crisis is crippling their supply chain, which includes grocery stores, and their prices there are going through the roof for the things that are still on the shelf. Not to mention the farms. The crops in Australia are predicted to come in at half of their usual because of the lack of diesel fuel and fertilizer. If they don't have fuel to run the equipment, they can't harvest the crops or plant new crops. And this warning is all over the country of Australia. It's something that people there are living with or dealing with day to day. And like I said, it's only going to get worse, and it's not just going to happen there. So I just wanted to share this with you. I don't have an answer for what's going to happen. I just thought you should all know. Shabadoo Booshkies. Shabadoo.
You're running out of time because food and energy rationing are next, and if you want a sneak peek into the future, take a look at what's going on in Australia.
Alright, firstly, 97% of everything we touch, eat, wear and use involves crude oil. Your food, your medicine, your plastic and your fertiliser. All your transport and your heating. Even your tomatoes from the farmers' markets. They're grown with petroleum fertiliser, picked by blokes who drove there in trucks made with crude oil, delivered in diesel, wrapped in petroleum packaging. Even the little sticker on the tomato, that's petroleum. No fertiliser means a hell of a lot less crop yields. You see, the problem is that 40% of the world's fertiliser comes from the Strait of Hormuz. closing of the Strait of Hormuz didn't just stop oil and gas from coming through, it also stopped 40% of the fertiliser from coming through. See, that spikes fertiliser prices around the world for farmers. We know what happens when 20% of fuel is taken off the market. What we haven't seen is the effect of 40% of fertiliser being taken off the market, because we're going to see the effects of that in the coming months. I think I'll cover that in the next post, but yeah, look, stay tuned. Peace.
Mooloolaba Wharf has no diesel. That means the 70 fishing vessels cannot go out and get seafood, which supply our markets, overseas markets and restaurants. It's prawn season now, so that means the sea is bursting with prawns. The fishing boats can't go out and get it. This is what the mainstream media is not telling you. Now, the oil, when the price went up, every petrol station and their suppliers had tens of millions of litres of oil already processed in this country. And the petrol you're paying for and the diesel that went up between 70 cents and $1.50 a litre was already on our shores. Why the price hike? Because the government wants to prepare us just in case it goes up during the war. So if they prepare us now, it won't be a shock. That's from a federal minister. Now, they want us to have travel restrictions, reminded me of COVID 2.0. Travel restrictions, try to work from home, and even like going for rides on your bike and everything, that's still a no-no because we have to save energy. This is another step towards 15-minute cities. Now, the most available resource in the world is water. The second most valuable resource is petrol, fuel. The Rockefellers back in 1895 coined the phrase fossil fuels because they knew they could get a lot more money from the petrol and the oil if they made it seem scarce, like there's not much available. There's fucking heaps of it. They're using this to control us, the people. So fuck you to all the globalists. You've got to stand up, yeah? Members of Parliament, hound the fuck out of them, yeah? They're just sitting back having a laugh, still getting paid, still getting their pensions, while they're hammering the normal people. We have the power. We've got to come together.
Australia is one of the world's largest food exporters. It ships beef, wheat, dairy and seafood across the globe. For decades, it produced far more than its own people could eat. Food security was never even a conversation. That has changed. The farms are struggling. Years of brutal droughts have destroyed grain crops across Queensland and New South Wales. When rain does come, it arrives violently, flooding fields weeks from harvest and washing away topsoil that took generations to build. The seasonal patterns farmers relied on are gone, and with them, the predictability that made Australian agriculture one of the most productive on Earth. Meanwhile, the inputs that grow food, fertilizers, pesticides, packaging, are almost entirely imported. From Russia, from China, from the Middle East. All of them now more expensive, less reliable, and harder to get. Farmers are using less. Yields are falling, prices are rising. Then there is the distribution. Food travels enormous distances across this continent before it reaches a shelf. Every step of that journey runs on diesel, and diesel is expensive, so the cost of moving food has surged, and those costs land on the price tag in the aisle. In cities, families are rationing, skipping meals, choosing between fresh food and paying rent. Food banks are overwhelmed, not with the homeless, but with working people who simply cannot keep up. In remote communities, the shelves go bare for days at a time. The truck did not come. The freight route was cut, and there is nothing to replace what is gone. The country that feeds the world is struggling to feed itself. Here is the fact that explains almost everything. Australia holds fewer than 30 days of fuel reserves. 1 month. That is the entire buffer between a functioning economy and a logistical standstill. The International Energy Agency recommends 90 days minimum. Australia has known about this gap for years. Governments commissioned reports, acknowledged the risk, and did nothing meaningful about it. Australia closed most of its domestic oil refineries over the past 2 decades. Importing refined fuel from Singapore and South Korea seemed cheaper and easier. It was. Until global supply chains became unreliable and fuel prices exploded. Now Australia has no ability to produce its own fuel in a crisis. It can only wait and pay whatever the market demands. That cost flows through everything. Every tractor harvesting food runs on diesel. Every truck delivering it runs on diesel. Every store keeping its refrigeration running uses energy that has become dramatically more expensive. The fuel crisis is not separate from the empty shelves. It is the direct cause of them, and ordinary Australians feel it everywhere. Grocery bills up 30%. Power bills doubled in some states. Mortgage repayments surging after aggressive interest rate hikes that were meant to fight the very inflation that fuel costs helped create. Families who planned carefully and budgeted honestly are now financially destroyed by forces completely outside their control. The cost of living crisis in Australia is, at its core, a fuel crisis wearing civilian clothes. The gaps on the shelves, the prices in the aisle, the anxiety at the checkout, they all trace back to an energy system that was left dangerously exposed for too long. And now, Australia is paying the price. The housing crisis is not a separate problem. It is a multiplier on every other crisis Australia is facing. When a family spends 70% of their income on rent, they have almost nothing left for food. That is why the food banks are full of working people. That is why the shelves in budget supermarkets empty first and fastest. The housing catastrophe is directly feeding the food emergency. They are the same crisis wearing different faces. Sydney is among the least affordable cities on earth. Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth all have followed the same path. An entire generation has been locked out of ownership, and renting is no escape. Vacancy rates are at historic lows. Rents have jumped 50% in some areas within just a few years. Builders are going insolvent. New homes are not being built fast enough. The gap keeps widening. Now look outside Australia's borders. Because the world is not standing by while this plays out. The United States and Iran are locked in a confrontation that is shaking global oil markets. The Strait of Hormuz, through which 20% of the world's traded oil passes every single day, sits directly in the middle of that standoff. Any escalation there sends fuel prices surging worldwide. And Australia, with its 30-day reserves and no domestic refining capacity, feels every spike immediately and deeply. China, Australia's largest trading partner, is slowing down. Its property sector is collapsing. Demand for Australian iron ore and coal has dropped sharply. Export revenues are falling. Government budgets are tightening at the exact moment more spending is needed. The world is not coming to save Australia. The world is adding weight to what Australia is already drowning under. This is what collapse actually looks like, not an explosion. Not a single day history marks with a date, something quieter, and in many ways, more frightening. It looks like a shelf that is a little emptier than last month, and then a little emptier than that. It looks like the petrol station that runs out on Wednesday and waits until Friday for a delivery. It looks like the farmer who walks off his land because the debt is unpayable and next season looks no better.
Breaking news, Australia is going into a recession. Watch this.
A warning this morning that a recession looms and inflation could soar as high as 6% if the Strait of Hormuz remains closed.
We've got until August for the crucial shipping route to open up, Ali. If not, Australia's facing a recession in September.
A recession? Over a fuel crisis? That is insane. We are the only country in the world that has officially announced or are in talks of a recession. There's no other country that's doing that right now. And we're a first world country. That is so messed up. What the crazy part is, there are other countries who are able to get in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. Spain being one of them, because Spain had a bit of balls and stood up for what they thought was right. Australia's just sent some troops over to the Middle East to assist the US in this battle.
It's also been reported this morning that 90 Australian Special Air Services members have been sent to the Middle East on standby in the event the Iran war escalates.
How is that going to help our cause? There is not one Australian out there that believes that Australia should be involved in this war. However, our incredible Prime Minister, Mr. Anthony Albanese, seems to have other ideas.
Heartless criminals have started siphoning petrol out of cars parked on the street as the crime wave from the fuel crisis gets worse by the day. Now, the price of fruit and veggies across Sydney is skyrocketing as grocers try to cover their ballooning costs.
At the fruit and veg shop, the rising price of petrol leaving supply far from apples.
Rather than coming daily to the market, it's only coming maybe twice a week.
Pushing up prices, the worst produce transported from interstate, like broccoli and fennel.
Probably about 25% to 30% increases so far.
Impacting small business, food producer Elizabeth Hewson sources her ingredients interstate.
How long can I ride this out? And you don't really want to make a drastic change like increase the price straight away.
Today, 51 petrol stations across the state have run dry, 164 without diesel, but fuel still being bought in bulk. This at a Western Sydney server.
If demand management procedures are required, that might be rationing, but firmly of the belief that it should be a nationally consistent approach.
Petrol thieves in Victoria targeting parked cars, prizing open fuel caps, siphoning tanks. Shoppers adjusting their habits. Retailers.
People who could afford a $1.5 million home may now look at $1.3 million as an example. They may move further out. They may compromise on size or location rather than looking at a townhome, a terrace home, or a house. They may start looking at apartments. And this is the part I really need you to understand, because this is where most people get misled. Demand does not collapse, it shifts and it transitions. And when demand shifts instead of collapsing, prices do not crash. They might stabilize in certain parts of the market. Certain segments might soften, but the affordable segment of property starts to boom and the overall system remains supported. There is also one more caveat that many people overlook. Australia's economy is deeply tied to property. Banks are heavily exposed to housing. Household wealth is largely stored in property. Government stability and the economic stability of the country is indirectly linked to the housing market. So when people talk about a full-blown property crash, you need to understand what that actually implies. It is not just prices going down, it is an overall economic collapse, not just a property collapse. And because of that, there is a very strong incentive across the system to prevent that kind of collapse. We have already seen this in action. During the COVID crisis in 2020, when incomes were disrupted and the economy slowed sharply, the government and banks stepped in with measures like mortgage repayment holidays to stabilize the housing market. You may have already forgotten, but in 2020, 21, 22, you could take 1 year off from paying your mortgage. Banks and the government got together and made that possible. That is an example of the system protecting the system, and this is why residential property is known as being completely bulletproof, because when you've got the entire system, when you have the government and all of its money and resources, power and control and rulemaking and lawmaking protecting residential property, you know you are investing into an asset which is bulletproof. And we've got recent history in the last 5 years of that being not just a theory, but of being a real strategy which played out right in front of our eyes. So this is an example of the lengths that the government can go of deliberate intervention to prevent a cascading effect of economic collapse and property collapse. Now, does that mean prices can never fall? Of course not. Markets can and do adjust. Certain areas can underperform. Certain segments can correct, and short-term declines are always possible. But a widespread, uncontrolled collapse across the entire Australian property market is a very different scenario, and it is one that the system is designed to avoid, and it is one that the system will not let happen. So when you combine all of this, the global cycle of rate hikes, followed by cuts, the structural demand and supply imbalance in Australia, and the systemic importance of housing, you start to see a much clearer picture. And once you see that picture, you stop relying on headlines. You stop relying on all of these fake gurus and fake online social media influencers, and you start relying on understanding, knowledge, facts, and patterns. Okay, so I want to share this really important part for you. If you understand this bit, you're going to stop reacting to fear and you're going to start making decisions based on logic. Across history, every time there has been a major economic disruption, whether it was war, a recession, or a financial crisis, or a health crisis, the sequence has been surprisingly consistent. Firstly, the economy slows down. Second, uncertainty begins to rise. Then central banks tighten initially to control inflation. And then when the slowdown becomes too severe, they reverse the course and start cutting rates to support the economy. And when rates are cut, liquidity comes back into the system, borrowing becomes easier, confidence improves, and asset prices recover. Over the long term, we've got about 6, 7, or 8% of asset growth every single year. Now, this does not happen overnight, and it does not happen in a straight line, but the direction is very clear when you zoom out. And this is exactly why I told you earlier that history does not repeat perfectly, but it absolutely follows a rhythm and a pattern every single time. If you find this a little bit complex, just understand this. War or recession or economic uncertainty always leads to low interest rates. That is economics 101. So yes, the RBA is hiking the rates up right now, but they are bound to come down in 3, 6, 9, or 12 months. We don't know the exact time frame, but this pattern always plays out. So please understand that and stop letting fear dictate you and your financial decisions. It's time you arm yourself with the real data, knowledge, and also insights, because if you don't, and if you give into the fear of current uncertainty, your financial freedom will pay the cost. Think about back in 2020, how many investment properties do you wish that you had picked up in 2020, 21, and 2022? Your net wealth, as many of my members and clients, could have grown $1 million, $2 million, $3 million quite easily. Now let's bring this back to you, because at the end of the day, none of this matters if you do not know what to do with it. You cannot control what happens in the Middle East. You cannot control oil prices. You cannot control what the RBA does next or what government decide. But what you can control is how you position yourself, your family, the people you care about. And right now, the worst thing is that you can sit there and decide to do nothing. And yes, doing nothing is a decision. Now, I want to warn you, because by the time things feel certain, the opportunity is usually already gone. You need to start thinking about your financial structure. If you are relying on a single income source, that is a risk in a world where jobs are changing rapidly. If you are not investing in assets that grow over time, you will absolutely 100% fall behind. Inflation and the cost of living will catch up to you. You need to start thinking long term. I'm thinking 10, 15 years ahead, because the short term fear is what causes most people to make long term mistakes. And if there is one thing I want you to take away from this entire video, it is this: do not wait. Take control, because no government, no central bank, and no global leader is going to manage your finances better than you can. Now, if you got value out of this, drop your thoughts in the comments, whether you agree or disagree, and let me know what you think happens next.
Australia just broke a world record, but not the good kind. We now hold the global title in collapse in household income out of all the developed nations. Since 2022, real household income in Australia has dropped by 8%. That is the biggest fall in history, not just our history, but the entire developed world. The OECD confirms it. Whilst income in developed nations rose across 2024, Australia actually went backwards. Only Finland joined us in our decline, and they still did better than us. Since the pandemic, Aussie income has barely budged. It's up just 0.1%. Meanwhile, the rest of the developed world has surged up. Canada up by 5.5%. The US up by 8.6%. The UK up by 2.5%. But Australia, we've flatlined. And why is this? It's because our labour productivity is collapsing. And our economy and our government is addicted to population growth over real value creation. Unless we can reverse this trend as soon as possible, we're headed to a lost decade. One where Aussies work harder for less, while the rest of the world pulls ahead. How much longer are we going to allow our government to bury our future under higher taxes, lower wages, and record migration while telling us this is all completely fine?
Well, g'day. Here we go again. Sorry about the usual intro. Standing here in front of the centre pivot, you see the diesel tank, everything behind me. The crop you see behind me is a maize crop. This is mainly targeted at our clowns in Canberra, Macquarie Street, and you know, particularly Labor and the Coalition, particularly, you know, obviously Matt Canavan, his attack on us and things like that. Yes, here I'm a One Nation hat, got my One Nation stubby hole. Yeah, having a white rabbit at the end of the day. This maize crop you see behind me, yeah, this will produce approximately 2,000 tonnes of maize. And it really is also directed at the metropolitan area, so they actually understand what goes into food and fibre production. So just a few statistics they understand. This crop was sown back in October. It's now, whatever date it is, the 20th of March or whatever it is. This crop's ready to harvest. It's taken 90,000 litres of diesel to get to this point, to run centre pivots, to run the pumps to pump the water, to run the tractors, the seeders, the sowing, the speed tillers, but we've still got to get it off. Now Australia's in this fuel crisis. The powers to be try to claim we're not in a fuel crisis. We need another 5,000 or 10,000 litres to get this crop off. And yet, Albo in his wisdom, yes fine, he's releasing 20% of our emergency reserves. We shouldn't be in this position. I mean, this crop, this is only 2,000 tonnes. So think about those statistics, but this crop is only 2,000 tonne of a national crop of approximately, on average, about roughly 400,000 tonne. So what's that, 0.05%, something like that, whatever it is. This is the magnitude, but because this crop has to sit here now, luckily it can for the time, but this goes into your corn chips, your corn flour, your bread, your cereals, all this type of thing. But of course, after, sorry, I've changed the can around. After getting these off, it's got to go into silos. Then we've got to wait for the trucks to come in. This is 30 odd kilometres west of Wagga. It's then got to go into trucks to be transported to mills. Then from mills, it's got to go to the food manufacturing, etc. The list goes on and on. So you can see the magnitude of the operation. No one has any issue with that. But here we are, starving in this country for fuel. And all because for 5 or 6 decades, we've had our fuel refineries shut down. Well, it's actually all happened in roughly the last 25 years, the first one being shut down in approximately 2001. I mean, the fuel parity nonsense started under a coalition government. So this is why I'm saying Matt Canavan, for all his talk and wanting to call the likes of us at One Nation, a bunch of grievance people, whatever, for 60 plus years, your party and Labor, the Uni Party, have delivered this crisis to us. 6 refineries shut down, yes, since 2001. The largest, I think, or second largest was Kurnell, shut down. That's the only one that actually shut down under Labor. The other 5, Matt, shut down under a coalition government.
It looks like the nurse who leaves the city because she cannot afford to rent where she works. It looks like the young couple who has stopped talking about buying a home because they know it will never happen. None of these things looks like a collapse from the outside. Together, they are exactly that. Every crisis in Australia right now is feeding the others. Fuel makes food more expensive. Expensive food empties the shelves faster. Empty shelves hit hardest the families already broken by rent and mortgages. Broken families reduce spending. Reduced spending shrinks the economy. And a shrinking economy makes every government response harder to fund and harder to deliver. The window for Australia to change course is not closed. It still has functioning institutions. It still has natural resources the world needs. It still has people who are resilient and capable beyond what the headlines suggest. But the window is narrowing. Every month without serious structural change is another month of damage compounding. Another shelf going a little more bare. Another family making one more impossible choice. The lucky country built its identity on abundance. That abundance is disappearing in real time. The shelves are the proof. The only question left is whether those with the power to act will do so, before there is nothing left to act for.